Story 1. Shadows of the Past. I've always loved the eerie atmosphere of old houses, the creaky floors, the dimly lit hallways, and the sense that they held secrets from a bygone era. So, when I found a charming Victorian home nestled at the edge of a quiet town, I couldn't resist making it mine. Little did I know that the house would soon reveal a terrifying secret that would haunt me to my core. The first few weeks in the house were blissful. I spent my days exploring every nook and cranny, marveling at the intricate details in the woodwork and gazing out of the ornate windows at the sprawling garden that surrounded the property. It was a peaceful retreat, far removed from the hustle and bustle of the city I had left behind. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the house was bathed in the soft glow of twilight, I received a call on my landline. I hadn't used a landline in years, but the house came with one, and I had it connected for emergencies. I picked up the receiver, the old phone, emitting a faint crackling sound. "Hello?" I said, my voice trembling slightly. There was a long silence on the other end. Just when I was about to hang up, a raspy voice spoke. "You shouldn't have come to that house, my dear." I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The voice sounded like it belonged to an elderly woman, but it carried an eerie undertone that sent shivers down my spine. "Who is this? How did you get this number?" I stammered. The woman ignored my questions and continued, "The house has a memory, you know. It remembers all who have lived within its walls, and it never forgets." I felt a chill in the air, even though the evening had been warm. "What are you talking about?" "Leave now," the woman warned, her voice growing more desperate. "Before it's too late, leave or you'll become trapped like the rest of us." With that, she hung up, leaving me alone in the dimly lit room, the phone receiver still in my hand. I was shaken, convinced it was a prank or a crazy person, but the ominous warning left me unsettled. The following days were plagued by an unsettling feeling of being watched. Shadows danced in the corners of my vision, and I could hear faint whispers in the dead of night. My dreams were haunted by strange visions of people from a bygone era, trapped in the house's dark history. One evening, as I was in the study, trying to distract myself with a book, the phone rang again. I hesitated but picked it up, half expecting the same eerie voice. "Hello?" I said, my voice quivering. This time, it was a man's voice, deep and cold. "You should have listened to the warning," he said, his words dripping with malice. "You're not alone in that house. We're always here, watching, waiting." My heart raced as I slammed the phone down, my hands trembling. I couldn't explain how they knew when I was in the study or why they were tormenting me, but I was growing increasingly terrified. As days turned into weeks, the house's atmosphere grew more oppressive. The once charming architecture now felt suffocating, and I could hardly sleep at night. I knew I had to find answers and put an end to this torment. One afternoon, I ventured into the dusty attic, hoping to uncover some hidden clue about the house's past. Amongst the old trunks and cobweb-covered boxes, I found an ancient photo album. It contained faded photographs of the house, dating back over a century. My eyes widened as I recognized faces from my dreams. The trapped souls. As I flipped through the album, a voice whispered in my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. "You're getting closer to the truth, my dear." I spun around, but there was no one there. It was as if the very walls of the attic were speaking to me. I rushed downstairs, clutching the photo album, determined to uncover the secrets of the house. Late that night, as I pored over the photographs, I received another call. I picked up the phone, fear gnawing at me. "You're close, so very close," the woman's voice from before whispered. "But beware the basement, that's where the darkness dwells." I hung up, my mind racing. The basement had always given me an uneasy feeling, with its low ceilings and dim lighting. Now it seemed I had no choice but to confront whatever lurked down there. With a flashlight in hand, I descended the creaky wooden steps into the depths of the basement. The air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to come alive around me. As I explored further, I stumbled upon a hidden door, covered in dust and cobwebs. Hesitating only for a moment, I pushed it open. Inside, I found a small, windowless room, its walls covered in strange symbols and old, tattered books. In the center of the room stood an ornate mirror, framed in tarnished silver. I approached the mirror cautiously and gazed into it. My reflection stared back, but then it began to change. It morphed into the faces of the trapped souls, each one crying out for release. Their anguished wails filled the room, and I could feel their despair seeping into my soul. Suddenly, the mirror shattered, and the room was plunged into darkness. I tried to flee, but something unseen grabbed hold of me, pulling me back into the room. The voices grew louder, and I realized I had become one of them, trapped in the house's dark history. As the days turned into years, I watched helplessly as new occupants moved in and received ominous phone calls. I could do nothing but whisper warnings from the shadows, knowing that they too would become trapped in the house's endless nightmare. And so the house continued to hold its dark secret, a never-ending cycle of torment and despair, with each new occupant becoming just another trapped soul in the Victorian nightmare. Story 2, Whispers in the Storm, a chilling midnight call. The rain had been falling relentlessly for hours, turning the world outside my window into a grey and sodden mess. I'd nestled into the comfort of my living room, wrapped in a cozy blanket, trying to find solace in a good book as the storm raged on. Little did I know that the night would take a chilling turn when the phone rang. I glanced at the clock on the wall, its red digits displaying 2:34 a.m. The world outside was shrouded in darkness, and the raindrops tapped on the window like ghostly fingers. My phone's ringtone pierced the silence, jolting me from the pages of my book. I hesitated for a moment, considering letting it go to voicemail, but a sense of unease tugged at my instincts. Something about this late-night call felt different, urgent. Reluctantly, I picked up the receiver. "Hello?" I said, my voice a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. On the other end, I heard a shaky, trembling breath, as if the caller were on the verge of tears. A soft, quivering voice finally spoke, barely above a whisper. "Please, help me," the voice choked out. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to identify the voice. It sounded like a woman, and her words carried an unmistakable note of desperation. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice tense. The caller seemed to struggle to find the right words, as if every syllable came at a great cost. I can't say. They're listening, watching. Please, you have to help me." My mind raced with 100 questions, but the urgency in her voice was undeniable. "Where are you? What's happening?" I pressed. The woman on the other end let out a stifled sob, and the line went quiet for a moment. Then she whispered, "I'm in your neighborhood, just a few houses down. I can see your lights. They're coming for me. Please, you're my only hope." A chill ran down my spine. The vague sense of unease I'd felt earlier now solidified into a knot of fear in the pit of my stomach. "Stay on the line," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "I'm calling the police." I dialed 911 quickly, relaying the situation to the dispatcher. They assured me that officers were on their way to investigate, but I couldn't help but feel the minutes dragging on as the woman's shallow breaths trembled through the phone. "Please," she whispered again, "don't let them find me." I did my best to keep her calm, to reassure her that help was on the way, but the fear in her voice was infectious, and my own heart raced in response. I tried to gather more information from her, but she remained elusive, as if afraid that even the slightest detail might be overheard. The minutes dragged on, each second feeling like an eternity as we waited for the police to arrive. The storm outside raged on, the wind howling through the trees and the rain pelting the windows. It was as if the very elements were conspiring to create an atmosphere of dread. Finally, the sound of sirens pierced the night, growing louder until they were right outside my window. I told the woman on the phone that help had arrived, that she could leave her hiding place and speak to the officers. But instead of relief, her voice grew even more frantic. No, I can't. They're here too. Please tell them not to come inside." Confusion and concern gnawed at me as I hung up the phone and rushed to open my front door for the approaching police officers. I quickly explained the situation, how the woman had called me for help and that she was somewhere nearby, afraid of being found. The officers split up, some searching the vicinity while others questioned me further about the call. They were baffled by the anonymous plea for help, and their unease mirrored my own. The situation felt like something out of a nightmare, a puzzle with too many missing pieces. Minutes stretched into hours as the search continued, but there was no sign of the woman. The officers were unable to trace the call, and I couldn't provide any concrete information about her identity or her exact location. As dawn began to break, the police left, their search having yielded no results. I was left feeling helpless and haunted by the woman's desperate plea for assistance. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still out there, somewhere in the shadows, in imminent danger. Over the next few days, I couldn't escape the sense of foreboding that had settled over me. I found myself constantly glancing out the window, as if expecting to see the woman's face pressed against the glass, begging for help. The storm had passed, but the atmosphere in my home remained heavy with dread. I tried to return to some semblance of normalcy, but the unanswered questions gnawed at me. Who was the woman? What had she been so afraid of? And why had she chosen to call me, a stranger, for help? One evening, as I was flipping through the local newspaper, a headline caught my eye. "Mysterious Disappearances Rock Quiet Neighborhood." The article described a series of recent disappearances in the area, all involving women who had gone missing without a trace. The police were baffled, and fear had settled over the once peaceful community. My heart raced as I read the article, and I couldn't help but wonder if the woman who had called me was one of the missing. Had she been captured by the same mysterious force that had claimed the others? As the days turned into weeks, the mystery of the anonymous phone call continued to haunt me. I couldn't escape the feeling that the woman's plea for help had been a desperate cry in the night, a cry that had gone unanswered. And as the storm clouds gathered once more on the horizon, I couldn't help but fear that the darkness that had touched her life had also touched mine, leaving a lingering sense of dread that refused to be ignored. Story 3: Midnight Thirst. The sweltering summer nights in our quiet suburban neighborhood had become unbearable. With the air conditioner on the fritz, I resorted to spending sleepless nights tossing and turning in my stifling bedroom. The muggy air hung like a heavy curtain, refusing to let me rest. It was during one of these restless nights, when the digital clock blinked 2:47 a.m., that my phone rang. Groggily, I reached for the receiver, irritation clawing at me as I fumbled to answer. Who on earth would be calling at this ungodly hour? "Hello?" I muttered, my voice laced with annoyance. On the other end, there was a strained silence, as if the caller hesitated before speaking. Then a raspy, trembling voice emerged, barely above a whisper. "Can you help me? I need water," the voice croaked. My annoyance turned to bewilderment. Who could be calling me for water in the middle of the night? I leaned up in bed, trying to make sense of the situation. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice filled with curiosity and caution. The voice on the other end sounded shaky, as though its owner was on the verge of tears. Please, it's an emergency. I live next door and I'm out of water. I can't explain now, just water. A sense of unease washed over me, mingling with the confusion. Why would my neighbor call me for something as simple as water? And why at this hour? Nevertheless, the urgency in their voice compelled me to act. "Stay on the line," I said, concern now dominating my tone. "I'll get you some water." I hung up the phone and rushed to the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of water from the refrigerator. My mind raced with questions, but the urgency of the situation left no room for hesitation. I couldn't deny someone help when they needed it. Holding the bottle tightly, I stepped out of my apartment and into the dimly lit hallway. The floorboards creaked underfoot as I made my way to my neighbor's door. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in the silence, each step heavier than the last. As I reached their front door, I hesitated for a moment. My neighbor, Mr. Simmons, was an elderly man who lived alone. I had seen him a few times in passing, a quiet and reserved individual, but this late-night call was unusual to say the least. I knocked gently, my heart pounding in my chest. "Mr. Simmons," I called softly, "it's your neighbor from next door. I have some water for you." There was no response, only the eerie stillness of the night. I knocked again, this time with more urgency. "Mr. Simmons, are you there?" With a trembling hand, I reached for the doorknob and turned it slowly. The door creaked open, revealing the darkness within. I cautiously stepped inside, my senses on high alert. The air was thick with an oppressive heat, and a strange metallic scent hung in the air. "Mr. Simmons," I called out once more, my voice quivering. As I ventured further into the apartment, the dim light from the hallway revealed a scene of disarray. Furniture was overturned, and the walls were smeared with dark stains that looked like dried blood. Fear tightened its grip on my chest, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I made my way down a narrow hallway, my heart pounding in my ears. The oppressive heat seemed to intensify with each step. At the end of the hallway, I found Mr. Simmons' bedroom door slightly ajar. With a trembling hand, I pushed the door open, and the sight that met my eyes filled me with dread. Mr. Simmons lay motionless on his bed, his frail form bathed in an eerie crimson glow from the street lamp outside. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. I rushed to his side, my pulse racing. His skin was cold to the touch, and there was no sign of life in his vacant eyes. It was as if he had been drained of all vitality, a mere shell of the man I had seen only in passing. As I stood there, stunned and horrified, the phone rang once more. I jumped at the sudden sound, my heart pounding in my chest. I reached for the receiver, my hand trembling. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice quivering with a mixture of fear and anger. The voice on the other end was no longer the raspy whisper I had heard before. It was cold and mocking, dripping with malice. "You're too late, my dear neighbor. He's already gone." I couldn't breathe, couldn't comprehend the horror unfolding before me. "Who are you?" I stammered, my voice barely above a whisper. The voice on the phone chuckled, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You can call me the thirst, my dear. The thirst that can never be quenched." With those chilling words, the line went dead, leaving me alone in the darkness of Mr. Simmons' apartment, haunted by the horrifying scene before me. I couldn't make sense of it all, couldn't fathom the nightmare that had unfolded in my neighbor's home. In the days that followed, the authorities arrived and launched an investigation into Mr. Simmons' death. They found no signs of forced entry or foul play, leaving me with a gnawing sense of unease. The circumstances of his passing remained a mystery, a riddle with no clear solution. I moved out of that apartment, unable to shake the memories of that fateful night. The strange phone call and the gruesome discovery haunted my dreams. leaving me with an indelible sense of dread. I couldn't escape the feeling that something malevolent had touched our quiet neighborhood, something ancient and insatiable, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the next unsuspecting victim to answer its sinister call.